Most products, such as clothes worn in everyday lives, could be said to be manufactured and outsourced from a different country. They could be made in China, Vietnam, Honduras, India, and the list goes on. Some fast fashion brands that outsource their clothing are H&M and Zara. H&M manufactures their products for their brands in over 1,600 factory buildings across Europe, Asia, and Africa. And Zara manufactures their clothing in countries such as Morocco, India, and Bangladesh. Good morning, my name is Shanna Bird.
I'm Matthew Freeman.
I'm Pablo Leon.
And I'm Connor Herrera. Our research question is, since the 21st century, to what extent does outsourcing in the fashion industry have a negative effect on least developed countries? Our argument is outsourcing the fashion industry has had a negative effect on least developed countries because of emissions, poor work environment, and unsustainability.
Generally, emissions are categorized as the chemicals and pollutants that are expelled into our atmosphere, our oceans, and our environment, but it also involves the chemicals that are left into outsourced clothing. These chemicals range from lead to formaldehyde, which are used in the manufacturing process, as well as toxins and carcinogens that are indicated in this quote. This quote also indicates that these chemicals should be banned but aren't, which is an issue with manufacturing and outsourcing overseas because these manufacturers have different regulations that may not address this issue. As these statistics mentioned, 63% of clothing tested from major brands that outsource contain hazardous chemicals, as well as the alarming mortality rate noted over there. However, the UN stated that the mortality rate may be as high as 200,000 deaths per year because of hazardous chemicals. Due to some brands' models for manufacturing and stocking, the regulation of chemicals may be overlooked, which is an issue for the environment of these least developed countries. As noted in this quote, a result of short lead time is insufficient time to process and control chemicals and materials. Along with this, the apparel industry is considered one of the top polluters of our environment. It is said that they cause 10% of our global carbon emissions, as well as they're responsible for 1/5 of industrial water pollution.
Moving on to our next claim, outsourcing fashion does offer several benefits to least developed countries, as economic growth and job opportunities. As you can see here, $162 million were invested in Nigeria's textile industry, and the unemployment rate has decreased as the textile industry has been expanding. As the federal government of Nigeria has said that it has allocated almost $163 million for the development of the textile industry, which has boosted the sector in terms of new jobs and the increase of exports and use of made in Nigeria apparel. As you may know, fashion is one of the main factors that contributes to the pollution of rivers and oceans. And as the WWI said, or the Water Witness International Organization said, outsourcing fashion is responsible for the paint-colored rivers, as shown here, that have surfaced in some African nations. So as you can see here, it's a good example. We have toxins, we have bleach, actual clothing pieces that have been polluting the rivers. And believe it or not, some civilizations in the area actually use these waters for cooking, irrigation, and maybe cleaning purposes. Here in this graph, we have 14 countries with the highest water pollution due to textile industry. Here we have South Africa, right here, it's our fourth one, with almost 20% of BOD per emissions per liter. BOD refers to biological oxygen demonstration, and it just means the higher it is, the more pollution is in the water. Pollution doesn't decrease in Africa, or it keeps increasing because some companies don't follow ecological regulations and they violate some laws with no consequences.
Next, we're going to talk about the poor work environment. In the picture shown here is the aftermath of the collapse of the Rana Plaza garment factory building. This building is located in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and it is where 5 factories are located and make clothing for major brands across the world in places like the United States, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Germany. Sarah Ashwin from the London School of Economics states that due to improper inspections, the building collapsed, killing over 1,000 workers. They said that the building was made from substandard materials, and an engineer came the day before it collapsed to inspect the building and warned the owners that it was unsafe to continue working there. And yet the owners forced the workers to return the very next day. This shows that in least developed countries, workers are at risk from unsafe working conditions in the fashion industry, and shows how companies in more developed countries show little effort into aiding the safety of these factories, as the inspections were overseen by the owners and the collaborators of this building.
As you can see on this chart, nearly 6% of all injuries in January to October of 2019, you can see that 6% of all injuries came from manufacturing and industrial plants. Seeing as how these two are correlated in nearly the same thing, we can add them together and get 12% of all workers in the Chinese manufacturing and industrial areas were injured in some type of way at work. There's also the problem of child labor. In 2012 in India, 152 million children were used for child labor, with 58% being male, 42% being female, and 48% being ages 5 to 11, 28% being 12 to 14, and 24 being 15 to 17. And out of all of those children used, 12% were used in the industrial industry for manufacturing. Our next claim is unsustainability. As you can see, in the United States, even in the United States, from 1987 to 2011, outsourcing has gone up 24%, meaning our jobs and more things are being moved off of our shores and going to other countries more developed like China and India, where they're charging less for product, which means in least developed countries these things are even worse because they're charging more for products that China and India are charging less for.
The outsourcing model shown here and others that contain similar aspects, they represent that due to short-term profitability, the industry is really competitive, which leads to mass production and extremely low wages and standards for the workers, as well as short product lives. However, fashion trends are always changing, which means that these brands need to produce new designs and clothing. However, due to outsourcing models, it can take months and months, indicated here, to produce these on-trend clothing, which means that these clothing items are put onto the overstock aisle or the clearance shelf, which leads to a loss in profits. In fact, Stanford Business claims that if a brand combines new popular designs with rapid production, a brand can receive up to twice the profit, as these products are being put on the shelves with very little overstock. However, with most models not including fast fashion, a lot of these brands are running into the problem of unsustainability.
Solutions and limitation. We came up with a couple of simple solutions that we can all do from home, especially when we're doing online shopping. We can do some background research on the brands you're shopping from, so you can know if the brands are eco-friendly or if they recycle their wastewater, so we can all try to save our rivers and oceans from fast fashion pollution. Here are some examples of the labels that you should be looking for in the brands.
Another solution that we came up with is that foreigners can directly invest into garment factories or donate to charities that work to improve the working conditions. An example of this is the Fair Labor Association, and their goal is to protect the workers' rights. They also place responsibilities to companies that use outsourcing in other countries to meet internationally recognized labor standards. So the situation of the Rana building collapse could be prevented with these standards placed upon these countries. However, one limitation we found to this is that some charities do take donations off of what they are given, so not all of the money goes directly to these workers. These are works cited pages, and thank you. Any questions?
All right, Matthew, we're going to start with you. If you had another team member, what perspective or limitations could they have reached that would have made a useful contribution to your project?
If we had another team member, then they could research more on the effects of America and our jobs and the effect on our economy as a result of a lot of fashion brands going to outsource and wanting to just make cheap clothes for the labor in overseas countries.
All right, thank you. Connor, Describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that makes you think differently about your team's solution.
I would definitely have to say Paola's actual pollution and how it affects our environment and how it's also affecting our living standards of certain people and countries in least developed countries. She really opened up my eyes to it because I focus mainly on how the work environment is affected, not actually the environment in general.
All right, Paula. What is a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own research?
The team solution. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I said it really fast, sorry. What is a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own research?
Our team solution was actually similar to my own research solution. We came up with a solution. We came up with several fashion solutions. Repeat the question again. One more time.
Your team's resolution, how does that make you think differently about what you came up with?
My solution was more about the environment and how it's going to help the pollution in rivers and oceans. On Shanna's side, it was more about the work environment and the safety of workers. So it really changed my perspective on how workers actually work overseas and not here in America, how they don't have the same rights. So that really changed my solution to not only focus on environment but on people as well.
All right, thank you. You got a good one. So give me one specific way that your thinking changed as a result specifically of Matt's findings.
So Matthew, in my IRR, I talked about more of the workers and how they are exploited, or how gender differences and how they affect the hierarchy of where they work. But Matthew talked about chemical emissions and how they affect the consumer, but and how it also affects workers, and that's something that I didn't consider in my RRR. So Matthew talking about that could have opened my eyes to that as well.
You guys are done.